Millionaire dines with Mistress' pregnant wife, casually sits beside them, leaving him humiliated. Picture a dimly lit, opulent restaurant draped in lush velvet curtains and flickering candlelight. At the corner table, a suave millionaire named Nicholas Hastings dines with a woman. Everyone assumes is his elegant wife until she leans closer, kisses his cheek, and reveals a blatant truth: she's his mistress. Suddenly, a pregnant woman appears, calm but heartbreakingly resolute, and takes a seat beside them without saying a word. Tension charges the air as hushed whispers echo across the room. What follows is an unforgettable story of love, betrayal, arrogance, and redemption, proving that even wealth cannot shield a person from the consequences of their actions. Nicholas Hastings was born into a modest home on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. His parents, Gerald and Martina Hastings, worked tirelessly. Gerald was a truck driver who was on the road more often than he was home, and Martina juggled a job as a hairdresser while raising their son. The young Nicholas, gifted with a quick mind and an insatiable hunger for success, dreamed of bigger things: twinkling skyscrapers, private jets, exotic vacations. From childhood, he believed destiny had carved a unique path for him, one that would lead far beyond his parents' humble beginnings. As soon as he could, Nicholas threw himself into every available opportunity. In high school, he spent weekends helping at the local hardware store, learning the basics of management by watching how stock was tracked and sales were made. He devoured books on entrepreneurship, business strategy, and psychology. The moment he turned 18, he was ready to leave Columbus behind and chase the American dream. College was his first stepping stone. He secured a scholarship to a small but prestigious institution that specialized in finance and marketing. His relentless ambition set him apart from the start. While peers complained about coursework, Nicholas saw each assignment as a new challenge to conquer, each networking event as a potential goldmine. By his senior year, professors spoke of him in hushed, admiring tones, predicting a meteoric rise once he graduated. Amid all this academic and professional fervor, Nicholas met Penelope, called Penny by her friends. She was a spirited literature major who believed in love stories, heartfelt poems, and the power of a gentle word. Despite coming from a well-to-do family, Penny never flaunted her wealth. Instead, she cherished simple pleasures: reading by the campus lake, volunteering at the animal shelter, baking cookies for tired students during finals. Her wide, empathetic eyes and genuine laugh drew Nicholas in. Though ambitious, he found in Penny a soft place to land, a counterpart to his sharp, goal-oriented worldview. They fell in love with the heady rush unique to the young and fearless. While Nicholas poured his time into internships at top corporations and building his personal network, Penny wrote short stories in her cramped dorm room, dreaming of one day becoming a published novelist. Their worlds, so different in scope, melded into a perfect yin and yang. After graduation, Nicholas launched straight into the corporate fast lane, joining a prestigious investment bank that soon discovered his knack for sniffing out profitable ventures. Promotions flew his way faster than he could update his resume. Penny, meanwhile, started building a quiet reputation, writing articles for small publications and working part-time at the local library. Their modest early days as a married couple were spent in a tiny apartment with second-hand furniture, but they brimmed with hope. Nicholas believed they were on the threshold of something extraordinary. Penny believed in the love that bound them through every challenge. When Nicholas's keen eye spotted a trend in the emergent tech startup sphere, everything changed. He leveraged every contact, called in every favor, and poured all his earnings into one major investment that skyrocketed within 18 months. Overnight, he became something of a legend in insider circles. He was the wonderkind who had doubled, then tripled his capital, Suddenly, the Hastings name appeared in magazines and online articles. Powerful clients wanted in on whatever Nicholas touched next. Of course, with money came demands. Nicholas's schedule filled to the brim with meetings, conferences, gala dinners, and more. Penny watched from the sidelines, supportive yet uncertain. She knew her husband was on the cusp of a new life, an elevated status filled with endless travel, fleeting acquaintances, and deals sealed over cocktails. But she trusted him wholeheartedly, believing their love was untouchable. One autumn evening, after a particularly successful trade negotiation, Nicholas proposed an impromptu dinner to celebrate. They found a rooftop restaurant with a breathtaking view of the city lights. As they danced under the stars, he told Penny, "Our life is going to be brilliant, shining brighter than these lights." He wasn't wrong. Over the next few years, Nicholas's name became synonymous with success. Offers poured in for partnerships, high-paying contracts, appearances at exclusive events. Their small apartment was replaced by a chic penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and a private elevator. Penny adapted, quietly focusing on her own writing projects, occasionally traveling with Nicholas, sometimes staying home to work on her stories in peace. Yet even as Penny's belly began to swell with pregnancy, her dream of motherhood taking form, Nicholas's eyes started to wander. The lavish parties introduced him to countless women, enthralled by his charisma and wealth. Penny's unassuming presence and growing bump, once so cherished, started fading into the backdrop of Nicholas's life. And that was where the seeds of betrayal were sown. No one would have guessed that the easy-going, graceful Penny would soon find herself enduring the ultimate humiliation. No one would have thought that on one fateful evening she'd walk into a five-star restaurant and casually sit beside her cheating husband and his mistress. But sometimes life deals us cards we never saw coming, and the tragedy often begins in the smallest cracks we choose to ignore. As Nicholas ascended the ladder of success, his social circle expanded exponentially. He brushed shoulders with CEOs, fashion models, and international celebrities. People clamored to have him on their boards or at their fundraisers. Photographers sought his presence, capturing images of him in tailored suits that wound up on glossy magazines, further fueling his growing brand. Penny felt like a relic of Nicholas's old life, a sweet reminder of simpler times, but increasingly overshadowed by the bright lights of fame. She tried to stay involved, but the truth was simple. The more money Nicholas made, the less time he had for her. Their once intimate evenings were replaced by endless business dinners. Their weekend getaways gave way to high-powered networking events. The baby in her womb, so precious to Penny, seemed less a source of joy to Nicholas and more an inconvenient complication that forced him to juggle fatherhood with an already packed schedule. In these swirling new social circles, Nicholas met a variety of intriguing personalities. One in particular stood out, Isabella Morgan. She was a stunning woman with raven black hair, sharp cheekbones, and an aura of quiet confidence. She worked in public relations and had a reputation for turning struggling brands into overnight sensations. Initially, Nicholas admired her from a distance, impressed by her ability to charm a room. She was equally curious about him, the ambitious young millionaire rumored to have the Midas touch. They first crossed paths at a high-profile charity gala in Chicago. Penny was supposed to attend, but morning sickness had gotten the better of her. Determined not to miss another prime networking occasion, Nicholas flew solo. He spotted Isabella by the champagne fountain, clad in a sleek black gown that highlighted her statuesque figure. Their introduction was pleasant, professional, strictly business, or so Nicholas told himself. Isabella proposed they collaborate on a new project to market Nicholas's next investment fund launch. As they exchanged contact information, an unspoken tension crackled between them. Over the next few weeks, Nicholas convinced himself their growing rapport was purely strategic. Their dinners were to discuss proposals, their text messages about brand strategies. Yet the times he found himself admiring the way Isabella laughed, or how her eyes sparkled under the restaurant's ambient light, were becoming too frequent to dismiss. He was like a moth dancing dangerously close to a flame. Meanwhile, Penny continued her pregnancy journey mostly alone. She had doctor's appointments to attend, nursery designs to finalize, and baby name lists to compile. Nicholas would nod or offer fleeting smiles whenever she brought up these topics, but the emotional engagement she longed for was absent. Sometimes, Penny questioned her own anxious instincts, but she reminded herself that Nicholas was under immense pressure. The corporate world was brutal, especially for someone who was always in the spotlight. She tried not to take it personally, but beneath her calm exterior, a nagging worry grew. If Nicholas couldn't slow down for her now, would he be there when the baby arrived? Penny kept her hope alive by focusing on writing and preparing for motherhood. She poured her heart into a new manuscript, a poignant tale about a woman grappling with betrayal and forgiveness. It was the catharsis she needed, an attempt to process unspoken fears. In rare, quiet moments, she'd imagine a future where Nicholas found balance, returned to her side, and cherished their child as much as she did. But as the days passed, his calls became briefer, his tone more distant. The name Isabella started popping up in conversation, more often always in a professional context. Yet Penny sensed there was more beneath the surface. One evening, just as Penny was drifting off to sleep, Nicholas slipped into the penthouse and sat at the edge of the bed. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume, one she didn't recognize. She dared not comment, swallowing the lump in her throat. Though her eyes were closed, her mind was racing. Did he still love her the same way? Why didn't he come home earlier? Had she grown so accustomed to ignoring signs that she'd become complicit in her own heartbreak? When Penny finally mustered the courage to confront him, Nicholas brushed off her concerns, attributing it all to stress. He kissed her forehead with practiced tenderness and told her to rest. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, Penny resolved to trust him for now. She wanted to believe that he was telling the truth, that the swirl of tension around them was a temporary gale, one that would eventually pass. But trust can be a slippery thing once doubts start to take root. Unbeknownst to Penny, Nicholas's attraction to Isabella grew daily. The texts turned flirtatious. Business dinners morphed into late-night cocktails. Soon the line that separated professional colleague from intimate companion was hopelessly blurred, and the gravitational pull of desire was too potent for Nicholas to resist. By the time Penny was 7 months pregnant, Nicholas found himself ensnared in an affair. He was too proud or too foolish to end. Despite the love he once held for Penny, the allure of Isabella's attention, her glamour, her willingness to indulge his every whim, these felt intoxicating, a rush that momentarily eclipsed his guilt. Though he performed his role as the supportive husband in front of friends and family, an insidious wedge had been driven into his marriage, a wedge that would inevitably lead to the fateful night when Penny, with her belly full of life, would make the choice to shatter his illusions in front of everyone. Nicholas's life now existed in two disjointed realms. In one realm, he was the accomplished entrepreneur, beloved by the public for his rags-to-riches story. Cameras followed him, journalists wrote glowing features, and philanthropic organizations lauded his charitable donations. He played this role flawlessly, complete with the adoring wife, Penny, who would accompany him to select events when her pregnancy allowed. In the other realm, one hidden behind closed doors, Nicholas indulged in midnight phone calls, stolen weekends, and secret dinners with Isabella. Their relationship was fueled by the thrill of deception and the raw excitement of doing something forbidden. For Isabella, the allure of being the mistress to an immensely wealthy man was irresistibly seductive. The gifts Nicholas showered upon her jewelry, haute couture dresses, extravagant travels came with the unspoken agreement that she remained discreet. Isabella, pragmatic and hungry for her own share of success, agreed to these terms. After all, she believed she had the upper hand in capturing Nicholas's heart. If he'd left his modest roots behind, why wouldn't he eventually leave Penny as well? The dual life weighed on Nicholas far more than he let on. He still maintained a sliver of attachment to Penny. She was his wife, the mother of his soon-to-be-born child, and a comforting figure from a simpler time. Guilt occasionally gnawed at him, especially when he glanced at Penny's growing belly or caught her quietly writing in her journal. She wore exhaustion on her face, but she never complained, and that silent endurance only magnified his shame. But rather than confront his own misdeeds, he fed his ego's bottomless pit with Isabella's attention and the applause of the outside world. To sustain his secrets, Nicholas developed an elaborate schedule. He'd claim to have urgent business trips that demanded overnight stays. He'd notify Penny that last-minute client demands required late-night brainstorming sessions. In reality, he'd whisk Isabella to lavish penthouse suites in different cities or even private resorts out of town. He made sure to send Penny thoughtful gifts, flowers, or letters timed to arrive whenever he was with Isabella. It was a twisted dance of placating guilt while chasing pleasure. Penny's friends began to notice her sadness, though she did her best to keep a brave face. One of her closest confidants was Michelle Thompson, a fellow writer and colleague at a small publishing firm. Michelle had visited the penthouse multiple times, aware of the growing distance between Penny and Nicholas. Though Penny never explicitly disclosed Nicholas's affair, she had no hard proof Michelle suspected it. She saw how Penny's laughter grew more subdued, how a flicker of pain crossed her face. Whenever Nicholas's name came up, Michelle encouraged Penny to open up, to see a counselor, to confront her husband if necessary. But Penny, still clinging to hope, kept insisting she was just stressed about the baby and her own writing deadlines. Her denial unraveled one fateful afternoon. Penny, searching for an old manuscript on Nicholas's laptop, found an open tab with a hotel reservation. The date on the reservation matched the night he claimed to be on a business trip. The suite was clearly booked for 2 people, complete with a spa package and a romantic dinner for 2. When Penny confronted him, Nicholas repeated his default excuse. It was a work thing for my client, but the details on the confirmation email told a different story. The spa appointments were in the name of Isabella Morgan. Still, Penny said nothing. She had no energy for confrontation, no desire to stage a dramatic fight when she was just weeks away from her due date. However, her course of action shifted. She began quietly gathering evidence, noting discrepancies in his schedule, double-checking receipts for dinners and trips. Her fear and heartbreak crystallized into a calm resolve. If Nicholas wouldn't come clean, she'd have to address the truth on her own terms. And so Penny planned. She learned of an exclusive dinner that Nicholas would attend with Isabella under the guise of finalizing a business merger. Everyone who was anyone in the local elite would be there. She also discovered a seat had been reserved for him under his official name, Mr. Hastings, accompanied by Miss Morgan. Penny waited silently, biding her time, letting Nicholas believe she was completely in the dark. She could have exploded with rage or threatened to leave, but she chose a different path, one that promised a dramatic showdown neither Nicholas nor Isabella would ever forget. The day before the dinner, Penny decided to meet with her obstetrician, Dr. Natalie Reese, for a routine checkup. The tension swirling around her had grown so suffocating that she worried about its impact on the baby. Dr. Reese was a kind woman with gentle eyes that held more empathy than words could express. She noticed Penny's stress immediately. "Everything seems fine with the baby," Dr. Reese assured her, "but you need to take care of yourself." Emotional stress has ways of affecting both your body and mind that aren't immediately visible. Penny nodded, tears pricking her eyes, yet she held them back, not wanting to appear weak. After the appointment, she found herself sitting in her car for nearly half an hour, hands trembling on the steering wheel. She wanted to scream, to cry out for help. She wanted to run away from the lavish penthouse that felt more like a lonely castle every day. But something in her refused to be swallowed by despair. The baby kicked inside her, a gentle reminder she wasn't alone in her decisions. She had a life inside her, a life that depended on her courage and stability. When she returned home, Nicholas was in his office, typing away at his computer. He barely looked up when she passed by. The ring on her finger felt cold. She recalled how he had slipped it on her hand on their wedding day, his vows echoing with sincerity, "I promise to love and cherish you for the rest of my days." Now those words rang hollow in her memory. Quietly, she entered the nursery she had so painstakingly decorated. Pale yellow walls, a white crib with a mobile of little stars and moons, and shelves lined with children's books. The sight simultaneously comforted and saddened her. This was supposed to be a new chapter in their marriage, a celebration of their love. Instead, the sweet lullaby of motherhood was competing with the relentless tempo of betrayal. That evening, Nicholas announced he'd be attending a critical client dinner the next night. Penny feigned surprise, asking if he wanted her to join. He quickly dismissed the idea, lying that it was a closed-door negotiation, not a social affair. Penny just smiled. If he noticed the flicker in her eyes, he didn't comment. He was too absorbed in his own web of deceit, too accustomed to having everything run on his terms. Meanwhile, Isabella was preparing as well. She tried on several designer dresses, deciding which would make her look the most striking at Nicholas's side. Part of her relished the idea of flaunting their relationship in front of other influential couples, stepping into the spotlight as Nicholas Hastings' partner, even if she was still technically his mistress. She was no stranger to the rumors swirling in the corporate circles. Some whispered that she was cunning, that she'd never settle for being the other woman. She intended to show them all just how formidable she could be. And so, as the day of the dinner approached, the city's well-heeled elites readied themselves for a glamorous evening. The invitation boasted an exclusive experience, a multi-course feast prepared by a Michelin-starred chef, fine wines imported from France, and a smattering of powerful business people, politicians, and celebrities mingling in a private lounge. Little did they know that the real show would have nothing to do with the menu or the decor. It would be about a pregnant wife, a duplicitous husband, and a self-assured mistress, all converging at one table. And in the hush of that room, under the glitter of chandeliers, the truth would stand revealed for everyone to see. The evening arrived with regal flourish. Chauffeured cars lined up outside Le Majestic, the upscale French restaurant known for exclusivity and grandeur. Valets, dressed in crisp black uniforms, guided each sleek automobile to the entrance. Guests alighted, draped in designer gowns and tailored suits, dazzled by camera flashes from society reporters who had been invited to capture the prestige of the event. Inside, the decor was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on golden wallpaper, while classical music from a live quartet wove through the laughter and clinking of champagne flutes. The aroma of truffle-infused delicacies teased the senses, promising an unforgettable culinary journey. Nicholas arrived with Isabella, perched at his side. He wore a tailored navy tuxedo, cufflinks gleaming, hair groomed to perfection. Isabella's dress was a daring shade of red, an unmistakable proclamation that she was a woman who basked in attention. Together, they turned heads as they made their entrance. Nicholas's face remained carefully poised, betraying no apprehension. He was confident Penny believed he was at a business meeting. In his mind, the path was clear: wine, dine, mingle with powerful contacts, and possibly return to Isabella's suite for a private after-party. The maître d' escorted them to an exclusive table near the large bay window that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. Within minutes, waiters appeared to pour champagne, their movements precise and silent. Nicholas held court among a small circle of influential figures, introducing Isabella as a close associate. She played her part effortlessly, charming them with subtle humor and the aura of a woman deeply entwined with Nicholas's professional and personal life. In another part of the restaurant, Penny slipped in quietly. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that draped gracefully over her growing belly. Her hair was softly pinned back, giving her a refined, almost regal air. A polite hostess recognized her, remembered her from the reservations under Nicholas's name in the past, and inquired if she'd like to be led to his table. Penny, with a calm smile, said, "Yes, please." As Penny made her way through the throng of guests, her heart thundered in her chest. She could see Nicholas from a distance. He was laughing at something, Isabella said, one arm draped casually over the back of her chair. The sight might have shattered her once, but tonight Penny was steeled by purpose. She heard gasps when people recognized her, the pregnant wife of Nicholas Hastings, obviously not on his arm this evening. Conversations hushed, eyes darted between Penny and the glamorous couple. A frisson of nervous excitement rippled across the room. Nicholas, catching the sudden shift in atmosphere, looked up. His eyes locked onto Penny's, and in that moment, time seemed to stop. Isabella, oblivious, continued smiling at the person next to her. Then she, too, followed his gaze, and the blood drained from her face. The room held its collective breath. Penny approached the table without haste, her posture erect, her expression composed. She placed one hand gently on her belly. It was as though the swirling chatter of the restaurant had fallen into a muted hush. People surreptitiously watched the unfolding drama, exchanging knowing glances and hushed whispers. When Penny reached the table, Nicholas tried to force a laugh, to maintain the facade. "Penny," he began, "what are you?" She raised a hand to silence him and then spoke quietly to a waiter. "Would you be kind enough to bring a chair for me? I'd like to sit with my husband and his associate." The waiter, uncertain but professional, complied. An extra chair was placed between Nicholas and Isabella, exactly in the intimate space they had been sharing. Nicholas's jaw clenched, but he forced a polite expression. Isabella's discomfort was evident in her stiff posture and the dart of her eyes, searching for an escape route. Guests in the vicinity openly stared now, some with pity, some with glee at the scandalous spectacle, and others with pure shock that Penny had dared to show up, pregnant and calm. Once seated, Penny turned to Nicholas. The first had no idea this meeting was so important. "Imagine my surprise when the hostess told me you'd already arrived." Nicholas fumbled for a response, but words seemed to fail him. In that moment, he comprehended the magnitude of his mistake. His wife's public presence left him no room for lies. The humiliating realization burned across his face, a wave of embarrassment he couldn't mask behind wealth or bravado. And so, under the golden lights of Le Majestique, a pregnant wife joined her unfaithful husband and his mistress at the most exclusive table in town. For all Nicholas's efforts to hide his affair, the truth was laid bare in dramatic fashion, a spectacle more riveting than any high society gossip could have manufactured. An uneasy silence enveloped the table, broken only by the subtle clink of cutlery and hushed murmurs from surrounding diners. Penny calmly folded her hands in her lap, her ring glinting under the ambient light. She regarded Isabella with measured politeness, as though greeting a new acquaintance at a casual luncheon. Isabella shifted, crossing and uncrossing her legs, desperate for composure, yet visibly flustered. Nicholas tried to regain some semblance of control. Clearing his throat, he gestured for the sommelier. "Perhaps we should order," he said, forcing a smile. "I'm sure Penny is hungry after coming all this way." His voice trembled at the edges, betraying his humiliation. Penny nodded. "Yes, let's order." Then she turned to Isabella. "I've heard wonderful things about the chef's signature truffle risotto. Perhaps you should try it." The suggestion was cordial, but an undercurrent of tension laced every syllable. Isabella mustered her charm, though it faltered under Penny's poised gaze. "I might—" "Yes," she replied, throat tight. Her typical confident allure seemed to vanish in Penny's presence. The role of the polished mistress who knew her place suddenly felt untenable in a room where the real wife commanded the spotlight. Around the table, a scattering of wealthy patrons half-heartedly resumed their own conversations, but their ears remained trained on the drama unfolding. Without a doubt, rumors of what had transpired would spread like wildfire through the upper echelons of society. Nicholas's affair had not only been exposed, it had been showcased in a fashion that guaranteed talk for weeks, if not months. Meals arrived, meticulously plated. Penny took a few bites to maintain decorum, but her appetite was non-existent. She wondered if the baby could feel the adrenaline coursing through her. Every fiber of her being was on alert. She sensed Nicholas's growing panic, Isabella's palpable dread, and the hush of judgment that weighed heavily upon them. When Penny could no longer bear the silence, she spoke softly, her voice tinged with sorrow rather than anger. "Nicholas, you've worked so hard for everything you have. I admired that about you from the start. It saddens me to see you risk it all for a moment's thrill." Nicholas glanced around, anxious about how many guests were listening. "Penny, this is neither the time nor the place," he hissed under his breath, feigning a hushed tone of admonishment. "You're right," Penny conceded, her tone unwavering. "It isn't. But since we're here, and since your associate is here, I thought I'd let you both know that I'm well aware of what's been happening." Isabella's face flushed. She couldn't decide if she should defend herself, remain silent, or flee. She had anticipated many outcomes in their relationship: long-term secrecy, eventual acceptance, maybe even Nicholas divorcing Penny. But she never imagined this swift public reckoning. Gathering her composure, Isabella took a sip of water. Her voice emerged strained. "I realize this is difficult, Penny, but you have to understand." Penny's cool gaze fell on her. "No, I don't have to understand anything," she replied. "You made your choices. So did Nicholas." Nicholas placed his trembling hand on Penny's arm, but she pulled away. The gesture spoke volumes. The dynamic had shifted. No longer was Penny the docile wife. In a matter of minutes, she had grown into a force that refused to be belittled or neglected. Diners around them pretended to focus on their own meals, but sly glances and half-smiles betrayed the collective schadenfreude. Nicholas Hastings, the golden boy of finance, had been brought low by his own hubris, right in front of the city's elite. A flicker of defiance crossed Nicholas's features. He despised feeling cornered, especially under the public gaze. "I think we should talk about this at home," he said in a stern undertone. "Certainly," Penny agreed. "You'll find your things in the guest room tonight. Until we speak, I see no reason to share a bed with a man who disrespected his vows." Isabella nearly choked on her water. She glanced at Nicholas, searching for guidance, but found only a hardened expression. Penny's words had left him at a loss. The dinner was in ruins, their reputations tarnished in a single stroke. This was a turning point that no amount of wealth or charm could undo. With the entire room watching, Penny signaled for the waiter. "Could I get a taxi, please?" she asked politely. The waiter nodded and swiftly stepped away. Nicholas made a futile attempt to salvage dignity. "I'll ride with you," he said, pushing his chair back. But Penny shook her head, voice resolute. "No. Stay with your date, Nicholas. I insist." She turned to Isabella. "Enjoy the risotto." Without another word, Penny stood. A hush fell over the crowd as she departed, her back straight, head held high. Isabella and Nicholas, left behind at the table, felt the weight of countless eyes judging their every move. In that charged silence, a clear message rang out. The millionaire husband had gambled with his marriage and lost face in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. And the once innocent wife had emerged stronger than anyone thought possible. The hostess, pity in her eyes, escorted Penny to the entrance, where a taxi idled. As Penny climbed into the back seat, she fought back tears. She had maintained her composure at the restaurant, but inside, her heart ached. The driver asked for her destination, and she gave the address of the penthouse. Her mind whirled, torn between heartbreak and an odd sense of liberation. Nicholas lingered behind at Le Majestic with Isabella, both too stunned to follow Penny immediately. Isabella leaned in, voice quavering with concern and frustration. "What are you going to do now?" she asked, searching Nicholas's face for some semblance of control. He rubbed his temple, feeling a headache ignite from the stress. "I don't know, but I can't stay here. The damage is already done." "I should," Isabella cut him off, her composure fraying. "If you leave now, it'll make this look even worse. Everyone's watching. At least pretend to salvage the evening, or your entire reputation could be on the line." Nicholas stared at her, a mix of anger and desperation fueling his every breath. "My reputation," he echoed. "It's already in tatters. Look around. They've witnessed everything. There's no point pretending anymore." But Isabella clung to the idea of carefully curated appearances. "Nicholas, you've spent your life building this empire. Don't let one scandal crush it." He slammed his palm on the table, rattling the dishes. A nearby couple jumped and then hurriedly averted their gaze. "I need to talk to Penny," he growled in a low voice. "I'm done with this charade tonight." Without waiting for a response, he threw some cash on the table, enough to cover whatever they had ordered, and then some, and stormed out. Isabella sat there momentarily, cheeks burning with shame. As she glanced around, not a single patron met her eyes. It was as though the entire room was collectively condemning her for participating in Nicholas's downfall. Gathering her handbag, she left quietly, unsure of her next move and weighed down by dread at the evening's disastrous turn. Back at the penthouse, Penny arrived to an empty residence. The hush of the marble corridors felt oppressive. She removed her heels, rubbing her swollen feet, and headed straight for the nursery. She couldn't bear to enter the master bedroom, where so many memories of her and Nicholas lingered. Instead, she settled into a rocking chair by the crib, tears flowing freely now. A half-hour later, Nicholas burst through the front door, calling her name. He found Penny in the nursery, the pale moonlight illuminating her silhouette. The tears were dried on her cheeks, leaving only a hollow expression. He tried to close the distance between them, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she whispered, "not tonight." He froze, words dying in his throat. They stayed like that for a moment, the tension tangible. Finally he tried to speak. "Penny, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt me." She filled in the blank, her voice catching. "You think that excuse absolves what you've done?" He swallowed hard. Guilt and regret warred within him. "I messed up. I was so caught up in everything. The fame, the money, the thrill. I lost sight of us." A bitter smile ghosted across Penny's lips. "Us. You lost sight of me, your wife and the mother of your child. Do you realize how alone I've felt these past months? And I believed like a fool that you just needed time, that you were under pressure." Nicholas stepped closer, hands trembling. "I was under pressure, but that's not an excuse. I should have been here for you, and I wasn't." Penny's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can forgive you, not now." He reached for her hand. She let him hold it this time, but there was no warmth in her touch. It felt more like a formality, a last vestige of what they once shared. Penny sighed, turning her gaze to the crib. "You want to make this right? Start by telling me everything. No lies, no omissions," Nicholas exhaled. "Isabella and I, we started seeing each other a few months ago. At first, it was about work, but it became more. I don't know if it was lust or some twisted sense of validation I got from her, but it doesn't change the fact that I've betrayed you." He paused, tears collecting at the corners of his eyes. "I understand if you want me to leave. I'll do whatever you ask." Penny studied him, the father of her unborn child, a man she once adored without reservation. Now she saw him in all his flawed complexity, a man undone by ambition and vanity. Her voice quivered when she finally spoke. "You'll stay, for the baby's sake, until I decide what's next. But don't expect it to be easy. You'll be in the guest room. We are not husband and wife right now. We're two people who share a future child." Nicholas nodded, shame radiating from every part of him. "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered, though he had no idea what that entailed. For a moment, his hand grazed Penny's belly, and she allowed it. He felt the baby kick, and an overpowering wave of emotion coursed through him. Tears spilled down his cheeks, silent testaments to the regret he'd carry from this night onward. They remained there, bathed in moonlight, a broken couple on the precipice of a new reality. Nicholas had shattered Penny's trust, and no amount of money or success could mend that easily. In the quiet of the nursery, they both understood a hard truth. The humiliating scene at the restaurant was just the beginning of their reckoning. News of the restaurant debacle spread quickly through the city's social circles. By the next morning, subtle headlines in tabloids and society blogs hinted at trouble in paradise for Nicholas Hastings. While some articles stopped short of naming Isabella, others were less discreet, describing a mystery brunette and a pregnant wife's silent but stunning revelation. Online discussion boards buzzed with speculation and moral judgments. Some readers sympathized with Penny, admiring her composure. Others criticized Nicholas's arrogance, calling him a cautionary tale for those who let power corrupt their personal lives. At the penthouse, Penny woke up feeling a heavy weight in her chest, as though she had taken a breath but never fully exhaled. Memories of the previous night returned with cruel clarity, her measured approach to the dinner table, the appalled stares, the jolt of adrenaline. Nicholas had slept in the guest room, presumably tossing and turning in guilt. She heard him stirring as she prepared breakfast, but she kept to herself, uncertain how to navigate this tenuous new arrangement. Michelle Thompson, her friend and confidant, called early that morning. "Penny," Michelle said gently, "I heard from a colleague about what happened. Are you okay?" Penny swallowed, tears threatening once more. "I'm surviving," she managed. "There's a lot to process." "Do you need me to come over?" Michelle asked. "I can bring food or just keep you company." Penny hesitated, glancing at her baby bump. "Maybe later. For now, I just want a moment to myself." Michelle respected her friend's need for space and didn't push. Still, Penny found solace in the fact that she wasn't alone in this ordeal. She had at least one person firmly on her side. Meanwhile, Nicholas was in damage control mode. He fired off emails to his PR team, instructing them to spin the narrative in a way that minimized the scandal. His advisors suggested a statement reaffirming his commitment to family values and clarifying that rumors had been exaggerated. But Nicholas couldn't bring himself to sign off on such blatant dishonesty, not with the fresh memory of Penny's tears. Eventually, he simply asked them to remain silent on the matter, hoping the gossip would die down without official comment. That day, business calls were a minefield of awkwardness. Some long-time clients offered polite small talk, pretending they hadn't heard. Others inquired about his welfare with thinly veiled prurience. The most aggressive calls came from potential partners who hesitated to finalize deals until the scandal blew over. They worried about associating with a figure now mired in negative press. By late afternoon, Nicholas was mentally drained. The facade of control he'd maintained for so long was crumbling, leaving him exposed and uncertain. All the wealth he had amassed couldn't shield him from the public humiliation or the personal grief that gnawed at him. That evening, Penny and Nicholas found themselves face to face in the living room, a strange silence hovering between them. Penny stood by the large window, gazing out at the skyline Nicholas once promised would be theirs to conquer. His voice was subdued when he finally spoke. "I owe you an explanation. More than just last night." Penny turned, arms folded protectively over her belly. "I'm listening." He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands for a moment before looking up. "It wasn't just about lust," he admitted, voice thick with regret. "It was the thrill of being someone powerful, wanted, envied. And Isabella, she fed that part of me. I thought I was invincible, that I could keep my world separate, but I was deluding myself." A bitter laugh escaped Penny. "You certainly did a good job of trying. But people like you, people who think money can solve everything, always forget that the human heart doesn't come with a price tag." He nodded, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes again. "I know, and I can't begin to say how sorry I am. You didn't deserve any of this." Penny's glare softened slightly, but her sadness remained. "I'm not the only one you hurt. You hurt our child too, by tearing apart the foundation we should have built for them. Is that something you're ready to face?" Nicholas swallowed, his voice trembling. "I'll face whatever I have to, if it means maybe one day you can forgive me." She looked at him for a long time, searching for sincerity. "I can't promise forgiveness," she said slowly, "but I can promise you this. My top priority is our child's well-being. If we're going to co-parent, you need to show me you're worthy of being in this baby's life. That means honesty, therapy, and proof that you're willing to change." He nodded, clinging to the lifeline of her words. "I will. I swear." Their conversation was interrupted by the ring of Nicholas's phone. He glanced at the caller, ID Isabella. Penny noticed, her expression growing cold. "Are you going to answer that?" Nicholas declined the call, turning off his phone. "Not now. I have more important things to focus on." A heavy silence settled over them again. Though the tension had thawed marginally, the road ahead remained unclear. Penny retreated to the nursery, leaving Nicholas alone on the sofa with his thoughts. The hush of the penthouse was unnerving, an echo of the emptiness that now threatened to swallow their marriage. In the darkness, Nicholas realized the weight of his choices. For years, he had idolized success, placing it above everything else. The night Penny sat at the table with him, and Isabella had upended that illusion, exposing the moral bankruptcy that accompanied his wealth. If he wanted a future with his child, and possibly Penny, he had no choice but to walk a path of genuine repentance. Days turned into weeks. Penny and Nicholas navigated an uneasy routine under the same roof. He moved to the guest room permanently, leaving the master bedroom to Penny. Although they exchanged minimal small talk about chores and baby preparations, they avoided deep conversations, both unsure how to bridge the cavernous gap. In public, the scandal gradually faded as new headlines took precedence. But in private, Penny's heartbreak festered, her trust in Nicholas nearly shattered. True to her demands, he began attending therapy sessions, both individual and couples counseling. The first time Penny agreed to join a session, she sat stiffly, arms crossed, letting him stumble through a confession of his misdeeds. There was anger, tears, and painful honesty, but no quick fix. Isabella, meanwhile, found her own professional world shrinking. Nicholas had severed ties abruptly. Clients associated with her PR firm distanced themselves, wary of being tangled in drama. Whispers circulated that she had a history of pursuing wealthy men. Her once glamorous image took a beating, and she discovered how swiftly fair-weather acquaintances could abandon someone mired in scandal. Late at night, she'd seethe with bitterness, blaming Penny for her misfortune. In her eyes, she had only followed her heart. Now, she was the city's cautionary tale, the ambitious seductress left with nothing. Michelle Thompson visited Penny often, offering a listening ear and moral support. One sunny afternoon, the two sat in the nursery, folding baby clothes. Michelle glanced around at the meticulously organized space. "You've done a beautiful job here," she remarked gently, folding a pastel onesie. Penny offered a half smile. "I just hope the baby finds peace here, no matter what happens between Nicholas and me." Michelle studied Penny's expression. "Have you thought about next steps? Whether you'll stay or file for divorce?" Penny inhaled shakily, meeting Michelle's sympathetic gaze. "Every day. Part of me still loves him, or, at least, the man I thought he was. But after what he's done," she trailed off, tears threatening, "I can't be sure there's a path back." Michelle placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Give yourself time. The baby's almost here, and that changes everything. You don't have to make a final decision this moment." Later that night, Penny was writing in her journal her own form of therapy when Nicholas knocked on the nursery door. His face bore a tentative hope as he entered. "I had my session today," he said quietly. "The therapist thinks it might help if we talk about our memories together, to remember why we got married in the first place." Penny put down her pen, sighing. Nicholas, the first, tired. He took a seat on the floor by her chair, looking up at her. "Please, just for a minute," he pleaded. Reluctantly, she nodded, tears gleaming in her eyes. "What do you want to talk about?" His gaze flickered to the framed wedding photo on a nearby table. "That day. I was so nervous I almost forgot my vows. You had to squeeze my hand to remind me to breathe." A faint smile tugged at Penny's lips. "Yes, I remember you nearly dropped the ring," he continued, voice trembling with emotion. "I meant every word I said that day, Penny. I never wanted to hurt you. I've made the worst mistake of my life, and I'll regret it forever." They both fell silent, memories weaving a delicate path between them. The tension was palpable, raw wounds, tentative hope, lingering love. After a moment, Penny spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'll ever see you the same way again, but I do see you trying, and that matters." Tears brimmed in Nicholas's eyes. He reached out and gently took Penny's hand. This time, she didn't pull away, though her grip remained light, uncertain. "I'm so sorry," he repeated. She looked down at their intertwined fingers. "It'll take more than apologies. I need consistent change. No more secrets, no more lies." He nodded resolutely, as though clutching onto that thread of possibility. "I'll show you." Though the air between them remained heavy, that night marked a subtle shift, an acknowledgement that their shared history and impending parenthood might provide a bridge over the chasm of betrayal. They both knew the journey forward would be fraught with pitfalls, but for the first time since the scandal erupted, a glimmer of hope flickered in the darkness. Months later, Penny went into labor on a misty morning when spring blooms adorned the city. She had just finished a gentle walk through the penthouse balcony garden when the contractions began. Nicholas rushed her to the hospital, speeding through city traffic with white-knuckled determination. In the delivery room, Penny clutched his hand in a vice-like grip, breathing through the waves of pain. Her cries echoed in Nicholas's ears, each one a stark reminder of what he risked losing. After hours of grueling effort, a piercing newborn cry filled the room. A baby girl was placed in Penny's arms, tiny, wrinkled, and perfect. Nicholas wept openly, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. Penny cradled their daughter, tears of joy streaming down her face. In that moment, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the public humiliation all receded into the background. They were simply parents welcoming a new life into the world. Over the following weeks, they navigated midnight feedings, diaper changes, and near constant exhaustion. Nicholas became fiercely protective, handling tasks he once dismissed as trivial. He rocked the baby to sleep, changed diapers, and even learned to cook a few simple meals so Penny could rest. Their household gradually evolved into a fragile partnership, anchored by the shared love for their daughter. One evening, as Penny dozed on the couch with the baby in her arms, Nicholas sat beside her. He brushed a stray hair from her face and whispered, "You're amazing. Thank you for everything." She blinked awake, adjusting the baby's blanket. "It's not just me," she murmured, noticing the sincerity in his gaze. "You're trying, and I see that." He took a deep breath. "I know trust doesn't return overnight, but I'm here for both of you." In the weeks that followed, therapy sessions became a couple's routine. They dissected the root causes of Nicholas's affair, deep-seated insecurities, the intoxicating sense of power wealth had given him, and his long-ignored emotional needs. Penny grappled with her own role, acknowledging that she'd sometimes retreated into her writing when Nicholas needed emotional intimacy. Though that didn't excuse his infidelity, it shed light on how two people who once adored each other could drift so far apart. As for Isabella, she moved out of town, looking for a fresh start where her reputation wasn't in tatters. She tried calling Nicholas a few times, but he never answered. All ties to that chapter had been severed. In private, he wished her well, hoping she'd find her path without causing more harm. Penny, too, sought closure. She wrote a short story about a woman scorned, culminating in a public confrontation at a grand restaurant. The story was raw, brimming with truth and heartbreak. When she shared it online, readers praised its authenticity, some suspecting it was more fact than fiction. Penny felt a sense of release, like she was finally letting go of the anger that had consumed her since the night she confronted Nicholas and Isabella. One afternoon, as she watched their daughter gurgle happily on a playmat, Penny realized how far she'd come. There was still a scar on her heart, but it no longer bled every day. Nicholas's unwavering efforts, coupled with the pure joy of seeing him love their child, helped mend parts of her trust. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a fragile new beginning, full of conditions and careful steps. But it was theirs, forged from the rubble of a once broken union. Eventually, Penny and Nicholas had a long overdue conversation about the future. Would they remain married or part ways amicably? The discussion was fraught with tears and revelations, but they emerged with a mutual decision to keep trying. They renewed their vows in private, no grand ceremony, just two people promising, once again, to cherish each other and nurture the life they had created together. Through heartbreak and humiliation, growth had bloomed. If Nicholas learned anything, it was that money could buy luxury, but it could never purchase true absolution. Only humility, honesty, and unwavering commitment could do that. And Penny learned that love, while fragile, could endure unimaginable pain if both hearts were willing to fight for it. Their story became a testament to second chances, whispered about in the city's affluent circles for years. People still remembered that night at Le Majestic, when Penny, heavily pregnant, sat beside her husband and his mistress, turning the tables in a single stroke of courage. But in the end, the real lesson was simple. Betrayal could be survived, sometimes even forgiven, but never without a seismic shift in the soul of everyone involved. And so ends the remarkable tale of Nicholas Hastings and Penny, two lives bound by love, nearly broken by betrayal, yet somehow salvaged through honesty and perseverance. Theirs is a story that reminds us wealth can't buy loyalty, and true commitment isn't a contract but a daily choice. When Penny calmly sat beside her husband and his mistress, she not only shattered his pride, but awakened something far more important, the realization that love can triumph over even the deepest wounds if met with genuine remorse and effort. If you found this story gripping, heartfelt, and reflective of life's unpredictable twists and turns, do consider supporting our channel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more captivating tales and moral lessons. Your support helps us bring you stories that resonate, inspire, and remind us all that redemption, though challenging, is never out of reach.